Welcome to Faith in Practice, presented by Higher Powered Sports, PT, the podcast where faith meets everyday life and vocational calling. Each episode, your host, Kurt Kessler, and his guest will explore how to live out your faith in your work, relationships, and daily challenges. Let's grow together and discover how to live out your faith with passion and purpose. Let's get started.
Hey there. Welcome to the very first episode of the Faith in Practice podcast. My name is Kurt Kessler, and I'm excited to get started today. For those of you who listened to episode 1 of the Higher Powered podcast, thanks for coming back. Thanks for sticking with me. Today's podcast is going to outline a similar story as that podcast, as I talk about what brought me to this point. But unlike Higher Powered, I'm going to add in the spiritual component and describe how that specifically shaped my path, and how it's funny to look back and connect the dots to see how God was at work during each stage of my life up until this point. So again, I grew up in central Pennsylvania. I grew up going to church, accepted Christ as my Savior at a young age, and it was always part of me and who I was. But during my teenage years, I tried to make Christianity fit me instead of fitting myself into God's word and God's plan. You know, we all sin and we all make mistakes, but at least the foundation was there to build upon. So I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life. I knew I was interested in helping people. I was interested in the human body. I played sports, had injuries, and PT became my dream in 11th grade. Senior year of high school, I was in the local bank. I got talking to someone who worked at Bloomsburg University, the local college to where I grew up. They told me they had a physical therapy program. I believed them. I didn't do my due diligence. I wasn't ready to leave home. So I decided to go to Bloomsburg and ended up enrolling in their pre-PT program because they didn't actually have a physical therapy program. I went there. More than half of my graduating class from high school went there. All my closest friends went there. And we spent a lot of time hanging out and a lot of time playing basketball. I did not have very good grades. Bloomsburg is known for being a party school, and most of my friends enjoyed that fun. I did not. I really struggled a lot with the feeling of being different, feeling left out from social events, which was my own choice. My friends, always made the effort to include me, but I just didn't feel like that's where I belonged, and really struggled with that. I just felt different. And I at that time in my life, I didn't like it. I was uncomfortable in my own skin. I was uncomfortable around alcohol, some experience I had growing up that really didn't sit well with me and really caused me a mess of anxiety in those types of environments. So it was one of the most challenging years of my life from an emotional and spiritual standpoint. So I decided it was in my best interest to look elsewhere. I wasn't able to transfer into a physical therapy program, so I ended up going for athletic training, it was similar, and I could use the degree, unlike the pre-PT degree. I really hated that. It felt like I missed my chance at physical therapy and a PT program and had to settle. But at the end of the day, it was my own fault for not doing the proper research for my career choice. So I ended up transferring to Marywood University, and I really loved it. Smaller class sizes were a lot better for me. I excelled personally and in the classroom there. I never actually planned on practicing as an athletic trainer. I just figured I would get the degree and go to PT school. And I had no idea how important this was going to be in my life. So I ended up meeting my wife at Marywood, which completely changed my life in a number of ways. At the time, you could even say now, but at the time, especially, she was so much further ahead in her spiritual maturity than I was. And it really pushed me to become a better Christian, a better servant, and just a better person overall. And that's when I really started taking ownership of my faith, was when I was at Marywood and when I met my now wife. So we went to church in the Scranton area. It was a church called Parker Hill. Mark Stenzi was the pastor at the time, and he was unbelievable. He was phenomenal. Just was able to connect with the word more than any other time in my life. He just delivered a message that was so clear and so practical And it was the first time that I heard God's word presented in that way. It really, really went on to change my life. There's a day in 2015. My wife, who was then my girlfriend, was doing an internship in Georgia for a year. So I remember this day. I was in church by myself. It was baptism Sunday, and I was sitting in the back of the church. And Pastor Stenzi was up front, and he started talking about baptism. And I just started feeling a little bit of this internal pressure, I would say. And in my head, I kept making excuses for why I was not going to be baptized that day. I didn't want to get up in front of people. I'm more of an introvert, I don't have a change of clothes, all these things. And every excuse that I made in my head, Pastor Stenzi had a rebuttal for on stage. It's not like we were having a conversation, but I'm guessing he's done this enough times to know every excuse that someone could come up with and had an answer for every one of them. And it got to the point where I had no excuses left. The feeling in my chest was so strong. It was almost like an anxiety, but it was the presence of the Holy Spirit really pushing me to do what I needed to. And I remember sitting there, I had my eyes closed, I was praying, and I thought, God, if this is you and I claim to follow you, then I can't deny you. So I got up, I got in line, I got the clothing that they had for everybody who was going to do it. And I got dressed, I went into the tank, and I got baptized. I was not expecting to do it. I was trying not to do it, and the Holy Spirit, through Pastor Stenzi's message, really pushed me to do that. And it was the first step of me taking ownership of my faith, really the initial part of the snowball to get me rolling for the rest of my life here. So I finished my senior year at Marywood. I applied to PT schools, applied to 16 different PT schools and didn't get into any of them. And I found that, my freshman year at Bloomsburg, where my grades were not so good, was what was holding me back. It was really pulling down my GPA. Schools decided to value that a little bit more than the other parts of my education where I did really well. So I ended up having to get a job as an athletic trainer in Delaware. I split time between the high school and a PT clinic. I was employed by a PT company. So I would do like half my hours at the high school and half in a PT clinic. And I really loved what I did. It was awesome, but I knew that I still had a greater purpose, and I knew that that purpose was physical therapy. So I applied to schools over a 3-year span and had no luck. I visited schools, I contacted people in the programs, I sent follow-up emails, and I just couldn't understand why I wasn't getting in. I had all this experience. I had good grades except for freshman year, and I was doing all the things that, you need to make a connection to get into one of these places. So it's very frustrating because I couldn't understand why I wasn't getting in. I knew that I had more in me to give professionally. I knew it was my purpose. I felt it was my purpose. There's no other way to say it. I just knew it. And I remember this. It's fun to talk about now. A couple of conversations with my dad. He was questioning, okay, this is 3 years now. You're not getting in. Like, what's your next plan? Or what are you going to do from here? What are you going to do differently? And I told him, this is my purpose. This is what I'm meant to do. So I'm going to keep applying. And the following year, Messiah University started a PT program. I applied to it. It was my first and only interview, my first and only offer, and I accepted the offer. Was super excited. It was near the area that my wife and I wanted to be long-term. So it was awesome. I was 2 weeks away from finishing my job as an athletic trainer, and we got the email from Messiah that said they were not accredited for the year that they were hoping to start. So they had to delay the program by a year to make some of the changes. So the school that I was at already had my spot filled. They had a replacement lined up, and I had to decide if I was going to return to that school or find a new school. There was an opening at Wilmington Christian School in Delaware, and it really interested me for a number of reasons, the sports that they had and the Christian focus. So I took that, and it ended up being my best and favorite year of athletic training for me to that point. I really enjoyed the people, the culture. The schedule was a lot nicer, and it allowed me to work in a different PT clinic, get some hours there, and experience some new physical therapists as well for me to learn from. So I went through PT school. I loved my classmates. I loved the professors, made some truly life-changing relationships. It was a class full of people with the same goals and mostly had the same spiritual beliefs and values. It just felt like we were a big team, all working together. There's so much support mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and I know that I'll never have anything like that again in my life. So it was just a great experience. And it's funny because, looking back, all the rejections, all the frustration of not getting into certain schools, and that was because the place that I was supposed to be didn't exist yet. I had to wait for the program to be created. I never thought I'd go to school for athletic training. I ended up meeting my wife, ended up taking ownership of my faith. I got the degree that I needed for the next chapter. And I never thought I'd practice as an athletic trainer, but I needed to until the PT school that was part of my plan was ready. So I gained so many valuable experiences. I met more people who heavily influenced my practice, Dr. Bergman, Misty Seidenberg, and I got introduced to residencies in physical therapy while in PT school. So residencies are a way to pursue advanced degrees and certifications. I made the connection with Misty Seidenberg at Messiah. She challenged me, and ultimately I pursued residency because of her, and I was accepted. And so with the residency program, you work your normal 40-hour work week, or at least the way that ours was set up, you work your normal 40-hour work week. Within those 40 hours, I had 4 hours a week where Misty was my mentor. So she would come and I would treat patients and she would give me feedback. And again, looking back, this was another dot that was connected. I would not have experienced this residency unless I went to Messiah and met Misty. So you also have to do an additional 5 hours a week of continued education or learning, and another 5 hours a week of sports coverage at a local high school, which was awesome because I was an athletic trainer. It was nice to be back in the high school setting. So through this, I ended up building a really good relationship with the local high school to where I was working. And I met the head athletic trainer, built a good relationship with her, and it was a great experience. It was hands down, the most stressful year of my life. A lot of that is probably just stress that I put on myself or pressure that I put on myself. I'm sure that Misty would tell you that was the case. But it was just a lot of extra work. It was very challenging. Really just, in some ways, it was just really necessary. One, for me to reach my professional goals, and two, for me to learn some valuable lessons moving forward. So studied for the board exam, passed the board exam in March of 2024, waited 3 months for the results, found out in June that I had passed. And this exam, it's a very expensive test, almost $2,000. And it's a 5-hour test, 200 questions. There's no specific passing score. It's kind of just like a floating score that nobody knows what it is. And it's based on, what they decide based on how people performed on the test. So it was very challenging. There's no two ways about it. It was very challenging. And I thought once the test was over, once residency was over, and I get back to a normal schedule, I thought my stress would just go away and I would go back to the relatively stress-free person that I've always been. And I learned that that was not the case. I was waking up several times a night, or waking up at 2 a.m. and not being able to fall back asleep, waking up at 4 a.m, not being able to fall back asleep. It was just difficult. My typical resting heart rate is probably in the high 50s, and I was waking up in the middle of the night and my heart was pounding in the 90s. So, and I I wasn't worried about anything specifically. That's just how I felt each day. And so I did some counseling, and it helped give me some strategies to help combat that. But I really just overall continued to feel really stressed out and really unhappy in general, especially just in the career portion of my life. And this is going to be a topic for a future podcast that I'll dive into some of the things that I learned during that time. But I remember in the spring, I was doing some outreach. I was going out in the community, trying to make some connections. And I met someone who just recently built a training complex. And I started walking through there, and she showed me the turf field and the weight equipment and some of the different things that they offered. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is like the dream. This is like where I want to treat people. They have everything at their disposal. And more than anything, it just started to get me thinking of life outside of traditional physical therapy. In the traditional PT setting, your company has standards and the industry has standards on how many patients you're expected to see a week. Usually, if you look anywhere, it's going to be somewhere between 55 and 60 patients a week. And the company that I worked for, they weren't asking me to do anything that any other company wouldn't ask of me, but it was still just overwhelming. I was starting to get burnt out with just the number of people I was seeing in a day and the lack of control of my schedule. And my biggest frustration was at some point during each day, I would be working with multiple people, 2 people, 3 people, 4 people, whatever. And on a given day, people come in with different needs, or, one day they're feeling okay. The next day they're feeling, more pain or whatever the case may be. And I just thought, if I could just have a minute to think, I could probably get you feeling better today. I could probably get you finished in like half the time that it was taking to get people better. It just bothered me that I wasn't able to give people my full attention. So you basically have 2 options. You either treat multiple people at the same time, give them every ounce of your attention, but then you have to document everything and likely do that after work hours, so you're extending your work day, or you cut into that by just a couple minutes to be efficient with your documentation, but then you're sacrificing even more time with the patient in front of you. All this to say, I knew that I could help them way faster if I just had a little bit of time to think, a little bit of time to plan, a little bit of time to really evaluate what they need instead of just going through it every day nonstop with multiple people. And there are, credit to the physical therapists out there that can do that and do it well in that setting. It just wasn't me. For whatever reason, I was made for something different. So I ended up doing a little bit of research on some other options. I started looking into a cash-based physical therapy model, which has started to grow a little bit over the last couple of years in popularity. But I interviewed 7 different people who have done it. And the more I talked to them, the more I thought, why can't I do that? What's holding me back? Why can't I do that? If they can do it, I can do it. And I prayed a lot. And this portion of my life is so vivid for a number of reasons. 1, because it wasn't all that long ago. And 2, because it was really a spiritual journey that has shaped what was then my future and now my present. So I prayed a lot. A path began to form for me to create something here, but it was so slow. It felt like it was taking forever. The path was clear ahead of me, but I had to depend on some other things to fall in place. And I started taking the steps to start my own business. I decided that I could go back to athletic training full-time, 1, for benefits, and 2, just for some stable income while I get this thing started. And I could do that each day with little to no stress. So I decided to go back to that, and I love it. I love being on the sidelines. I love interacting with athletes, and the opportunity at the local school where I did my residency hours had an opening. They went in under a new contract, and I had the opportunity to apply for that job. So I applied for it, and it took things a while to materialize. It took things a while to take shape. And I remember driving to work every day, listening to Christian music to try to focus myself, try to focus my mind in preparation for each day of work, just trying to survive each day. And that sounds dramatic. I understand there are a lot of people who are in way worse situations than me, people who have to do things they don't like because they have to, people who have not had the resources that I've had to, get the education that I need for all of this. I understand that. I'm just speaking from my own experience of my day-to-day challenges and my day-to-day stress, what it was like. So I understand that there are people out there much, much, much worse off than me. I'm not looking for any pity, but it is part of my story of what I'm doing now. I was just trying to get through each day. Every day, just not happy going to work. I was not myself. Didn't have anything left to give my family when I got home. My patience was shorter, and it really started to bother me. So long story short, I was offered the job at the high school, and I accepted it. I was able to leave my old job and officially start my business. And each workday since, I have experienced total relief of what I was feeling. I used to wake up, 20, 30 minutes before I really had to, just to lay on the floor with my dog, because that gave me a little bit of comfort before I went to work. And now I'm away from that lifestyle, away from those challenges. And it has been a huge relief. God answered the prayer, but it was not on my timeline. My timeline would have been much faster. My timeline would have been this or that. But you know what? If I take a moment here to connect some dots, I had a bad freshman year of college. I transferred. I met my wife, learned to take ownership of my faith. I got the degree and the skills that I needed for the next chapter of my life. I had to work and wait for the PT program that was meant for me until it was created. I met my mentor in PT school. I did the residency, which gave me the skills that I needed to become a better therapist. During the residency, did coverage hours at the high school that I ended up working at now as a means of transition to my greater purpose. You look back and you connect some of those dots and you think, all this time, I either didn't know what was in store for me, or the things that were happening around me, I had no clue how they would be used for my future purpose. And it's really awesome to sit here and think back at each fork in the road and say, okay, I was led down this specific path for this specific reason to take me to this specific moment. And it's really cool. And it's just a great reminder how good God is, even when we don't realize it, even when we don't know he's working. Everything that we're experiencing goes for a purpose. So now I've learned not to hold too fast to my own plans or my goals, because I'll end up where I need to. My job each day is to do the best that I can as a person, and then God holds the cards for the future. My future is open-ended. I still plan and I still continue to pursue God, but I'm open to whatever future he has in store for me, because he has given me a purpose at each turn. Whether I liked it in the moment, each turn was for a reason. So going forward on this podcast, the episodes are going to be focused on life's challenges, sports, using faith to walk through each of those challenges. Now, I have a lot of incredible guests lined up that are going to share their stories, their faith, and we can all support each other and grow through each other's experiences. I know that in stepping out and talking about my faith, there are going to be ways that Satan tries to deter me from doing that. I'm sure there will be things that I say on here that some people won't agree with. Christianity can be a sensitive subject for many. That's why we're all told, don't talk about politics, don't talk about religion, don't talk about whatever. I'll be the first to admit I'm not a pastor. I'm just a person trying to live for God. I understand that not everything I say will sit well with everybody. I just ask that if that's the case for you, I ask that before you bomb me with insults or whatever, let's just examine each of our hearts and see what God is saying first. I am not perfect. I am not Jesus. I'm just trying to do what I feel I'm being led to. Now, for a fun segment coming up here, I'm going to introduce you to each show will have a segment called Word Up.
It's time for Word Up.
Word Up is the part of the show where I will either tie in a Bible story to reflect the topic or a song lyric, something to show that God is in it and that God has done this. Again, I'm not a pastor, but I'll try to bring context to each episode. I can't just pluck words out of the Bible without knowing the context. That can be a little bit dangerous. So, for Word Up, I'm gonna use a few different ones to kick us off today, and I'll keep today's pretty short. So the first one is Colossians 3:23. Work willingly at whatever you do as though you are working for the Lord rather than for people. I chose this today because it's the verse that my business and my practice is based off of. I'm doing this business, this podcast, everything from the direction of God and for the glory of God. And that's really the verse that has pushed me forward into this. The other part of Word Up that I'll bring you today is a song by Aaron Cole. It's called Like You, featuring Taryn Wells and Toby Mac. I love this song. I can listen to this song on repeat, and I often do. The lyric to share with you is, if I'm going to be more of anything, I just want to be more like you. If I'm giving my all to anything, I'm giving my all to you. And that's just what it is. Everything I'm doing here is for the Lord. I want to be more like Jesus with all of my thoughts and interactions, knowing very well that I'll fall short every day, but that's what I'm striving for. Before I wrap up today, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to a few people that have made this possible. Thank you to David Verano for helping provide some biblical context for some of the upcoming episodes. Thank you to pastors Mark Stenzi and Bryce Taylor for connecting me to my faith on a deeper level. Thank you to my family who built my faith foundation, and for my wife challenging me to walk in my faith even more each day. That's going to be it for the first episode. Thank you to everyone for watching or listening. If there's ever something I can help with, I would love to connect with you. Feel free to reach out with any topics or guests that you would like to see on the show, and we can work together to make that happen. I want this to be a respectful and uplifting space for anybody to join, but I realize not everyone who listens to the Higher Powered podcast is going to be in on this. That's okay. This is here for whoever wants it, whoever needs it. You can find my email and other ways to connect in the show notes, and I will see you next time.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode of Faith in Practice. We hope you found inspiration and practical wisdom to help you live out your faith on and off of life's playing fields. If today's conversation resonated with you, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. Your support helps us continue sharing stories and insights that empower you to align your faith with your vocation. For more resources or to connect with us, visit hpsportspt.com. That's hpsportspt.com. Remember, your faith isn't just a part of your week, it's a part of your life. Let your light shine.